Sì, bene, buonasera a tutti.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Does the audio system work? Yes, fine. Good evening, everybody. We're going to start this third conference, which is online, in the preview to Slow Wine Fair. We're very close to the date because as of Sunday, 26th of February, up to the 28th, which is the Tuesday, at Bologna Fiere, there will be the second edition of Slow Wine Fair. And the event of the Slow Wine Coalition, which are organic farmers who have signed the Coalition for Good and Fair Wine. We have many people who have signed up, more than 700. If you haven't done so, you can go onto the site and register to be there, because it certainly will be a great exchange of ideas, and you can have the taste of good, clean, and fair wines. This, as I say, the third webinar. The first two looked at key issues with regard to wine, climate, and then denominations, a common good. And this evening, this is the third conference, which is Life is Organic. Now, many of the companies of Slow Wine Coalition are biodynamic or organic farmers, and also the people who are attending the second edition, about 50% are bio farmers and producers. So it's a very good idea and quite right that we developed a webinar together with Ferdinand and to dedicate a meeting looking into the specific theme of organic farming, because we all have an idea of what the organic farming means when we see the symbol of the leaf. This is the only certified sustainability brand in Europe, in fact, but actually getting into the nitty-gritty and understanding the founding values of the biological and agro-organic type of farming practice, which underpins organic practices, and then the practical aspects of organic farming on the climate, etc., and all the European regulations surrounding this are very important to know when we look at an organically produced product. And it's very important also when we deal with the network of farmers, and there are many, many other aspects. And this conference wants to go into these aspects to give information and to go into more detail. So the first speaker is going to be Michele Bono. He is the Department of Plant Production Sciences of Research Institute of Organic Agriculture, first set up in 1973 in Switzerland, then Germany in 2001, and Austria in 2004. And this is the reference institute internationally and in Europe with regard to organic agriculture. So we'd like to thank Michele Bono very much for being here tonight. 50 years of research in organic practices for the FIBL. And we want to start with the question of the soil, in fact, because when we talk about organic production, it's not just not using synthetic chemical substances, but looking after the fertility of the soil, especially. So we're going to start with this first speaker to look at this theme and to focus, which is a focal point for organic practices, and also it works to try and offset climate change. So I didn't, by the way, say who I am. I'm Maria Grazia Mammuccini, President of Federbio. Thank you, Maria Grazia, for this introduction. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see? Good evening. I'm called Michele Bono, and I am of Italian origin, but I grew up in Germany, and I studied in Geisenheim, and I have been working for about more than a year now at FIBO with the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture and also biodynamic agriculture. Now, FIBO was presented by Maria Grazia. This is the institute that has a global view of the bio and the organic sector. And we have a farming network of more than 150 wine growers, but also farmers. And we carry out experiments on the farms. Here you have an idea of where it is. This is very good for FIBO because, and this is in the small part of German canton of Switzerland. What am I going to talk about? The structure of the soil, the functionality of the soil, and managing the soil in the vineyard. And then I'm going to look at the results of the DOK experiment, which from 1978 was started. And we have 45 odd years of data collected and experience on biodynamic practices. Now, what is the soil? It's not just the backdrop, if you like, it's the natural body in which we have compenetration of rock, water, air, and organisms, living organisms. So it's not just a backdrop to farming and to growing things. It's an ecosystem in the subsoil, which is all important. Now, the total soil is 94% mineral content and 6% it is made up of organic material. And organic material of this 87% is non-living organic substances, and the rest of the percent is 6% living roots and 7% is the organisms in the soil. In other words, micro and macro organisms that live in the soil, that are part of the soil. And also earthworms, for example. Now, I have a photo of the analysis of a clod. Now, here we see that it contains water and air, active living organisms, nutrients, and structure. And you can see the analysis, which is very important when you actually go onto a hill or you look at a surface and want to see whether the soil is working well. We always carry out this sort of test. And we look at the crop profile, and it's very important to look at the clay content to see how that works, because there we have the various colonies. Things are, in fact, written in German here. I'd like to translate them. The cultural profile is, again, the complex clay structure, the organisms, and the humic clay complex, which is all important to keep these organisms in there, because they have pores or holes which allow the air to go through and keep the soil alive. Now we have the soil here as an organism. The root of the plant, the rhizosphere, it's called. Here you can see this in yellow, and around this we have a 0.4 to 4 millimeters of width, and that's the habitat around the root. And this area is all important both for the plant, but also for the soil itself and for the microorganisms that live in it. And I'll go into this more afterwards. And then we have the mobilization of the nutrients in this rhizosphere, or this area around the root. If this is not intact, the plant won't be able to take up nutrients from the soil. And this interaction is all important because it stabilizes the soil, especially the mineral part of the soil. The soil now is an organism. It's very important to create and maintain a very high level of soil fertility, because of course on that depends the resilience of the plant. It reinforces the plant. And to be able to create this resistance, you have to use compost or organic fertilizers if necessary, not chemical fertilizers. And then also grass cover crop is all important, which strengthens the activity and improves the structure of the soil. That's very important. And also it's important to avoid the use of mineral fertilizers and chemical weeding substances, because if we use these mineral fertilizers and weeders of the chemical substances, well, then we will be killing off the organisms that I mentioned before and the structure of the soil. This is in German too. I'd like to go through it briefly, translating it, but I wanted to show how fertilizers can revitalize the soil or destroy the subsoil. You can see the brown bit is the nutrients that we give, and the green is the nutrients that we give to the plant. Here, we put in organic fertilizer. It can be compost, or I know in Italy we use also, when you press olives, for example, you use the skin and what remains from the crushing of the olive oils, and that goes to the humus, and the nutrients go into the soil, and these nutrients then go to feed the microorganisms, which then in turn give substances to the plant. And these substances are organic fertilizers, and they reinforce the plant, as do the microorganisms in the soil. They too benefit from organic fertilizers. On the other hand, we have chemical fertilizers, and it helps the plant, but these chemical substances don't help the microorganisms, which are destroyed. And as a result of that, you have soil which is impoverished. In wine growing and in the vineyards, there are two aspects which are all important. You, of course, experts know this. You have the managing of under the row and the inter-row swathe. Here you can see that under the rows you have this has been plowed up and mechanically, and now here you see the mechanical weeding, or about green manuring, or we have, on the other hand, chemical weeding. So it's really necessary that you have to use mechanical weeding or green manuring to fertilize the soil. Now, for the management of the soil between the rows, it's very important to have a crop cover of many sorts of species that you can put in between the rows. There are many types of plants with different roots, and this benefits the soil. If you see the top of the plant, which creates biomass, which will create humus, and then you also have biodiversity, which helps to develop more insects, and then you have the interaction between the plant and the crop that we're growing in the soil, and the inter-row crop root. And then we have humus, which becomes a nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium, which goes in turn to the plant and also nurtures the microorganisms in the soil. Of course, there's competition between the plant and our crop, but as a rule, if our crop, in this case, the vine, is resilient, the competition won't cause much harm, because with this sort of biomass, we develop humus, and that, of course, helps us to retain water in the soil. I got another picture here. You can see all the roots of the different plants. This is a plant that goes really deep into the subsoil, and then there are plants which keep to the first 30, 40 centimeters, but they give good structure and they ward against erosion. For example, in 2020-22, when it didn't rain very much, we had problems of dry soil, and which was further dried by the wind. Had we not had these plants which kept these soil together, we would have lost a lot of topsoil. I have a couple of photos here. Now, we work in the inter-row soils in autumn and in winter, because the rest of the nutrients which are in the soil, and these are absorbed, and we can create in the winter the organic mass. And then on the right-hand side, you can see in the spring or early summer, when it's dry, we can then create a mulching, and the plant, in fact, is then turned in, and with the roll, we can feed the soil, and the soil is kept fairly wet, and we don't have evaporation of water from the soil. And also this biomass can be used as humus for the soil, which will give nutrients to the plants. Here you have an idea of the sort of mechanical tools that you can use. Now, I'd like to talk about the DOK experiment. This was created in 1978 in the Swiss cantons of Germany, and this is a question of comparing the organic and biodynamic and conventional systems of farming and agriculture. There are very many types of biodynamic. There's been 0.7 and 1.4. These are two types of the biodynamic farming practices which were experimented and compared. And the difference is the dose that was given of the compost, which was applied. Now, this experiment is not that of the experiment in agriculture. It doesn't really represent wine growing or the vineyard. It's agriculture in general, but it is interesting to see that there is a trend nonetheless. Now, the conclusion of this DOK over the last 20 years, and I read everything that could be extracted from these experiments, and it can be said that the organic systems obtained a lower harvest than conventional methods. I think that's quite obvious. If you decide to go for organic agriculture or wine growing, you can't go for mass production. Also, you have it depends. Therefore, there's a variation with regard to the vintage and the year. So after 20 years, the pH of the soil had fallen to the point that it was necessary to give limestone to increase the pH a bit. And then the organic system showed a lower tendency to become sandy, and it showed better structural stability. That's because there's more also biodiversity, and the soil didn't dry out as much. The microbial biomass and its activity and its efficiency also were significantly higher than conventional methods. And this is really important because with the microbial biomass, this makes the difference with the organic systems. All the indicators of soil fertility showed that the organic systems were better, and especially the biodyn systems were excellent. In biodynamic systems, the fertility of the soil was fairly well increased. We don't know whether it was because they used 500 or 501. We just saw that there was a difference from between bioorganic and biodynamic. The dynamic of the nutrients in the upper part of the soil, first 20 centimeters, the stock of nitrogen and also of organic carbon was increased in the biodynamic system, whereas in the bioorganic 2 system and the confirm 2, the stock remained constant. Especially when we talk about sequestering of carbon, we saw that there was a tendency for organic carbon to be increased in the soil. And also, there was an efficient use of phosphorus in the biosystems that were compared. With regard to biodiversity, we noted that floral biodiversity in the biosystem showed 5 or had 5 species more, and the germinal seeds were from 2 to 3 times higher than in conventional systems. So we had a an increase of diversity, not significant, but there is a tendency. Also, in terms of insects, these were increased, especially earthworms. We saw that in the organic systems, the earthworms had increased about twofold compared to conventional systems. The mycorrhiza fungi were found more frequently in the organic systems that had not been fertilized. We also had one plot where we didn't give any fertilizer at all, and we saw that the mycorrhiza fungi had increased in this particular plot. The interesting thing also was that during the drought stress, the mass increased, the mass of fungi increased. Now, the emissions of nitrogen tritoxide were lower in the biodynamic systems. And that's clear because in the conventional farming systems, you have chemical fertilizers, and of course, most of this evaporates. Now, during periods of drought, the bacterial community was more diversified and active in the organic systems, and this had a positive effect on mineralization of nitrogen and therefore on plant growth. So these are the aspects on biodiversity. Thank you, Michele, for this very interesting work, and I'd like to ask you perhaps to close with, you've talked for about 18 minutes. So if you can draw to a close. Okay, sorry, I thought you were going to continue. That was the last slide. Thank you very much. And these are my contacts. If you want to contact me, I've got my mail there or even telephone. Thank you, Michele. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you before because these last slides were very, very interesting indeed. And therefore, we've already got a first presentation that can give lots of indications, especially perhaps might prompt questions, because the soil is a living thing. There's a lot of life underneath our feet. And the fertility of this living being must be key and a real focus, but especially on the basis of everything that's coming out with regard to the knowledge that we have of the soil, practices like chemical weeding should be now considered completely outdated, especially from a technical and scientific point of view. They should be considered completely obsolete because they have a really negative effect on the fertility of the soil. Now we're going to hear from the next speaker, Emanuele Busacca, IFOAM Europa, or the associations of organic farming, and also the distribution of products and services to organic products belong to IFOAM. They are a constant fundamental reference, therefore, and therefore the new regulation is very important, and we'll hear about that, especially with regard to what the impact it will have on organic wine.
Thank you, Maria Grazia. Can you hear me well, and can you see the presentation well? I hope so. Okay, so I will start. Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for inviting me to this very interesting event. My name is Emanuele Busacca, and I'm in charge of the organic regulation in IFOAM Organics Europe, that is the European Federation for Organic Farming and Production. We are based in Brussels with an office of with 25 people, and we are representing the organic sector and movement in front of the EU institutions. And we try to influence all the EU legislation and policies that can be relevant to the organic farmers, organic producers, and also organic traders. We work on many dossiers, from the Common Agriculture Policy to GMOs, climate change, use of fertilizer, pesticides, and also on sustainable food systems and labeling. And today I was asked to give a presentation on the new organic regulation and its possible implication on organic wine production. I mean, considering that the requirements for organic wine production have not really changed compared to the previous organic regulation, I would focus my presentation on a couple of topics that can be interesting to hear for you who are involved on organic wine production. So this is a scary slide. Perhaps you have heard already, or you have already noticed that the new EU organic regulation is very complicated to read. And this first slide shows such complexity. The new EU organic regulation is composed by one basic regulation. And in addition to that, there are many secondary regulations. There are still many other on the making. At the moment, there are around 26 secondary regulations, and those have been already amended, corrected, and integrated many times. This means in practice that if you want to have a complete view of the whole organic regulation, you need to open and read around 50 different documents. You can see all the figures in this slide. But again, today we have only 15 minutes. I will focus only on a couple of topics. Usually a presentation on the new organic regulation can take also 2 hours. So, first of all, is the new EU organic regulation already applicable? Yes, in the European countries, it is already applicable since January 2022. But in non-EU countries, in reality, is not yet applicable. In fact, there will be a gradual application, and it will depend from the time taken by the Commission to recognize the certification bodies that operate in third countries, so outside the EU. So a date cannot be established, but every certification body will do according to its own plan. But this means in practice that the new EU organic regulation does not apply yet in non-EU countries and will probably start to apply beginning of 2024. For sure, from the 1st January 2025, the new EU organic regulation will apply worldwide. In the new regulation, there are significant changes for EU and for non-EU countries. Indeed, the first one is, and the most important, is that there will be a compliance approach. So it means that outside the EU, in all the world, the organic regulation will apply the same way as in the EU. Really, the organic regulation, as it is written for the EU operators and farmers, will be also applicable in the non-EU countries. This was not the case so far. There was a bit of flexibility. So this means, this explains the compliance approach. There will be also equivalency agreements with some countries. We have today already trade agreements with 14 equivalency agreements, with 14 non-EU countries, including United States, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and so on. So this is very important for the one of you that export wine in those countries. And all these equivalency agreements, they have to be renegotiated. So we are not sure 100% if we will still have the same 14 agreements. We don't know about the outcomes of the negotiation. Indeed, one important difference is represented by the new rules and requirements for groups of operators. In the previous regulation, there were no detailed rules for group of operators. There was just a guidelines. while in the new regulation, there are really very detailed rules and requirements. First of all, the first change is that until today, group certification was only allowed in low-income countries, mainly in Latin America, in Africa, and Southeast Asia. With the new EU organic regulation, instead, it will be possible also to have this group certification system also in the EU countries, in the European countries. So we now do a little focus on group certification. So if you are interested on how to apply group certification in the European Union, I will give you some details. First of all, what does group certification mean? Because this is not sure that everyone knows, but it means that you know that so far in the European Union, in Italy or in other EU countries, every farmer or producer who wants to place his or her organic product on the market has to be controlled and certified individually by a certification body. Every farmer has his or her own certificate. And up to now, in order to facilitate the access to the organic market for small farmers, again, it was allowed in low-income countries to use the certification, the group certification system. It means that one certificate would cover hundreds or also thousands of small farmers. Indeed, there are criteria and requirements to follow, and also the group needs to have an internal control system well established. In this slide, you can see the figures of how important is group certification. This comes from figures from a FIBOL report. So you already know FIBOL from the previous speaker. So there is a FIBOL report on group certification from 2019. And you see that 2.6 million organic producers all over the world, they use this certification system, and 4.5 million hectares have been certified. And all the products that we import in the European Union, like coffee, cocoa, sugar, tropical fruits like bananas, aromatic plants, they are all certified, not all, most of them are certified through this group certification system. You can see, I mean, we will not go in details, but you can see also here the figures in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So you can see really how many small producers all over the world can use this very good system that is good to save money and also to save all the bureaucracy of certification for the small farmers. In this slide, there is an overview of the key requirements to be met for creating a group of operators that can be certified as group. So again, this also applies now to the European Union. So since 2022, it is possible also in the European Union to create a group of operators that can be certified as group. First of all, but there are quite strict criteria compared to the past. First of all, the group has to be composed only by farmers. So processors or traders, they cannot be part of the group. Then there is a limit of 2,000 members per group. I mean, you might think that this is a high number, but in reality, there are groups in Africa that have more than 10,000 or 20,000 members as well. So it's, of course, in the European point of view, 2,000 members is more than enough for how our agriculture is structured. Then the group has to have its own legal personality. They have to establish an internal control system. So it means that they have to have internal auditor that make all the procedure and all the audit internally to all the members. And they have to have a system of joint marketing. So this means that the farmer that is in this group, he or she cannot sell the product directly on the market, but all the selling has to be done through the group. So the farmer alone cannot sell anything, but they have to provide, to supply the product to the group, and the group will sell in its own name. indeed, there are also all the members of the same group, they have to be in the geographic proximity, so that it means in the same region or at least in the same country. So if we go again to the size, because this is only for small farmers, and so there are criteria to identify small farmers. A small farmer, according to the new regulation, is a farmer that has less than 5 hectares land, or that has an organic turnover of less of 25,000 euros. The important is that the farmer just apply one of the two. So it means that you can have also a farm that is bigger than 5 hectares, but if the organic turnover is lower than 25,000 euro, then the farm can be still part of the group. So the member should just respect one of the two criteria. Again, we have the maximum of 2,000 members in a group. This cannot be more than 2,000, and this is a new limit of the new regulation. It's important also that this group of 2,000 small farmers, they have to have their own legal entity. So this has a very strange implication. Just to give you an example, if a wine cooperative in Italy, for example, has organic farmers and non-organic farmers, then the organic farmer, they have to create their own group, and they have to create also a new legal entity, new legal personality. So they cannot use the legal personality of the cooperative. So this is for sure a limit on the applicability of this system in Italy or in European Union in general. There are indeed then on the regulation, this is something new. You can find a lot of details on how to structure your internal control system. So it means that this group of farmers that they gather together, they have also to have an internal system with inspectors, with auditors, with procedures and documents, and this is very precisely written in the regulation. On the other side, also from the external certification bodies, there is some new numbers. So it means that the external certification body needs to visit at least 5% of the member of the group. So it means that if you have a group of 1,000, the external certification body has to visit at least 50 farms, and from 20 farms they also have to take sampling to be analyzed. So indeed also the cost of certification can be quite high, because now these new threshold make the inspection from the external certification body much more expensive. And another thing to consider is that if the external certification body finds that the system doesn't work well, then the certificate, the organic certificate, will be withdrawn for all the group. So this is also perhaps a limit to the applicability of this system. And this is the last slide. I hope to be on time. So leaving apart the group certification, another important implication that the new organic regulation can have on winemaking is about the use of external input. So as you have seen before in the previous presentation, you cannot use chemical weed controls, so you cannot use mineral fertilizer. In fact, in the regulation, there are annexes with positive lists of substances and products that you can use. There is an annex for plant protection products where you can find mainly the active substance. You will not find the product, but the active substance. Another list with fertilizers and soil conditioners. Another list with food additives, processing aids, and products used in wine production. But this 3 list is nothing new in reality. It's something that was already in the previous regulation as well. The thing that is new and that is very important for you to know is that the products for cleaning and disinfection that you use in your wine making facilities or in your storage places. So there will be a positive list of substance that you can use, and this will have really a big impact, because today there is no limit to the substance that you can use. And while in 1 year from now, probably, so from 2024, there will be a list of products for cleaning and disinfection that are allowed. Last remark I want to say about the input. You have to consider that according to the compliance approach, also outside the EU, farmers that are in Latin America or Africa or in Asia, they have to use the same substance that are listed and authorized in the European Union. So this indeed can be as well a limit, including the cleaning and disinfection products. And this, Maria Grazia, was my last slide, and I want to thank everyone, and I'm ready to answer to questions.
Grazie a te, Emanuele, hai usato solo 2 minuti in più, quindi benissimo così, e soprattutto ci hai fatto un quadro molto
Thank you very
interessante.
much indeed. You've given us a very interesting overview of the certification, which is a very important aspect, especially for farmers. But you've also told us of how complex the whole thing is, how complex it is to manage all the process in organic practices and farmings, organic regulations which guarantee the system, which certainly have become very, very important and very complex. There are several questions already that we've had in the chat. So if you want to ask questions, we can in fact start collecting the questions and distributing them. Now we have Eduardo Tilati, who is the person who is the certification manager of Demeter in Latin America. This is a fundamental activity because in biodynamic organic agriculture, Demeter is very important. And over and above what was given us
molto
by Carlo Buono for people, he always also looks at the question of fertility of the soil. Soil, which is managed in organic farming, is always the soil
Quindi ora Eduardo Tilati,
which is most fertile.
So yeah, thank you, Maria Grazia. I'm hoping you are hearing me. Sorry, I didn't bring any presentation, so you will need to only hear to me. Sorry for that. My name is Eduardo Tilati. I'm from Argentina, living in Germany since 2015, working with Demeter since 2006, but part of the team here in Germany since 2019. I'm responsible certification manager for Demeter in Latin America. So I wanted to share in these 15 minutes my presentation divided in 3 sections. A first short introduction about BFDI, the Biodynamic Federation Demeter International, concepts related to the principles of Demeter in which the standards are set up, and a final section just commenting about what we call a fundamental or main social law. So let's go to BFDI. BFDI is a collection of organisms, and in before 2020 was decided to gather all those organizations worldwide, a federation. The federation was founded in 2020, called Biodynamic Federation Demeter International, BFDI, and this umbrella organization is the one covering or gathering all the organizations which are in the different aspects of life related with anthroposophy, which is the philosophy behind the biodynamic method, but also behind the Waldorf education and anthroposophy, medicine, and so on. So Under this umbrella, there is Demeter, or the former Demeter International, currently known more as ICO, International Certification Office, which is the organism or the organ of BFDI certifying farmers or processors or traders everywhere where no local Demeter organization is established. For example, in Italy, there is Demeter Italy, and Demeter Italy is the responsible to certify all farmers, processors, traders in Italy, from the inspection until certification and issuing the certificates. On all other countries, in Germany is the same, Spain, Switzerland, in all those countries where a Demeter local organization is located, of course, they are on charge of certification. So I am part of ICO, and we are working within ICO, under the umbrella of ICO with Latin America. Our standards are an integrated document, and those standards are 160 pages, covering all aspects of certification, from primary production to processing, trading, but also, because Demeter is a private brand, it's a private trademark, also the standards cover the regulation about how to use the trademark Demeter, which is a co-brand. It's a brand which is located on the product together with the own brand of the product. So those standards are followed these principles, mainly, of course, ecological principles, but also social responsibility principles. So since 2023, the standards are including social aspects to be verified during inspections. But so all the certification is very clear on the web pages of the different organizations. You can go to demeter.net and you can find the rules for certification. But I wanted to bring more the concepts, which is the second section of my presentation. And I want to share two concepts. One, of course, any third-party certification is a voluntary certification. So the farmers apply voluntarily to that certification. It's the same as organic. But in this case, we want to link this voluntary decision with a concept of coherence, to be coherent, what we have decided, or the farmers have decided. So, and this is a concept that I found also very interesting not far ago. And it's the term that, of course, we have our ideals in every aspect of our life. We have our ideals. For example, in biodynamics, one of the ideals is to have or to create a farm organism, an organism which is self-dependent and is not dependent from external inputs coming into the system all the time. So this is the ideal, or could be one example of an ideal. But then we are in our daily activities facing a reality which is normally far away, or hopefully not so far, but normally is far away from the ideal. And what we understood is that to achieve, to close that gap between the reality and the ideal situation, the will of, in this case, of the farmer, or our, as human beings, our will, the intention to do things or to make the things happen, is what can close that gap between the reality and the ideal. And we want these farmers, through, even guide them through the standards, also even could be a bit strange, but also through the non-conformities that we are finding during the inspections, to guide the farmer to go more to the ideal, guided by their own standard, by the standards itself. This is as a one concept where we want to go. And also a second concept is trying to promote the evolution of the complete supply chain, starting with the farmers, of course, create, as Michele has really nicely said, creating living soils, which I am not a specialist in one, but of course, I understand that this is a main tool for create a terroir on your wines, and also guiding the winemaking process instead to produce the wine. So if we have a living soil and we create a good raw material, a good grape, we could have probably or much probably just to guide that process, fermentation process or natural process, and not to add additional additives, because there is an disbalance, and we need to balance because of the non-good management at the soil or at the farm level. But also not to focus only on the final product, the grape or the wine, but also to focus on the own farm community. So the workers, the owners, the managers who are working together in some way in a kind of community, and how to push for that community development. So it's not just to look for the final product and the quality of the final product, but to we can say to enjoy the process also, and to make the people enjoy the process. And probably also we have really pragmatic conclusions about how this enjoying the process, or how can this developing our own community within the company brings economical positive results to the companies. More committed workers, more exchange inside the team, and so on. So, but also on group of farmers to bring the farmers, or to help the farmers to live their own individuality, and to also come as part of an organism. And I have a really nice examples. In Argentina, I started in 2006 with Demeter inspections. In 2 or 3 years, around 10 wineries started to work biodynamically and certify Demeter. And so as we saw a group of wineries, we wanted to bring them together. And we started a seminar, which is still until today, every year, an international seminar on biodynamic viticulture. And also during the pandemic could be online. And after 4 or 5 years to gather all the wineries together once a year, we delegate the responsibility on them to continue with the seminar. And they did it. They took the responsibility by their own. And also, out of that seminar, they had created 2 groups which are working monthly together to try to strengthen their own performance as biodynamic farmers. And not only in Argentina, but also a second group was formed in Chile, because they started to work together and to participate together, biodynamic wineries from Chile and from Argentina, in that seminar. And now that seminar is taking place 1 year in Argentina, 1 year in Chile. We have brought several speakers from Europe and specialized on biodynamic production, also people from FIBL. So this is a good example how, if we are pushing without an own interest, just for the benefit of, in this case, of the farmers, the initiative brings incredibly good results. And I also want to talk in the third part of this fundamental social law, which is exactly referring to this aspect. Of course, traders and distributors also are focused on our ideals, try to create long-term relationships, and are also fair relationships between the farmers and the traders and the distributors. And of course, trying to inform the consumer all of these developments. Marketing campaigns, for example, trying to communicate what is Demeter, what is under biodynamic. And the third section of my presentation is this, what we call fundamental or also main social law. Let me please read it. There is several definitions. This is one defined by one author. This was said by Rudolf Steiner, who is the pioneer in this movement, and it says the more an individual works for the benefit of society or the needs of others, and the more society ensures that each worker or person is supported sufficiently to lead a dignified existence, the greater the well-being and prosperity of this society will be. So basically, and this is a good example with the group of farmers in Argentina and Chile, through Demeter, we wanted to promote people coming together to improve their system, to improve their performance, and to help them to find a better way to produce, even much above the standards, because the standards are the standards, are the basics, are standards, the basics. So we want the farmers, the producers, and the human beings being part of those equipments or teams, evolve as a person, and to understand the sense of life, not only the sense of agriculture and how to manage the soil and so on. So we need to understand that this is, and out of that development, a lot of initiatives, also two groups working together, and better wines, because they are exchanging experiences, also the weaknesses from their own performances. And so if we would agree on this main social law, where we should try to work for others and to create better communities, we could also think, and also in general, for companies in general, we are talking about wine, so we can talk about wineries, that if it would be the only goal to produce better wines, or if we use the opportunity to have a team, a community within a company, to make this community to evolve, and to use the wines as a economical fund of resources, to obtain resources to improve this community, and also to a really powerful communicating tool. So the wine is incredibly, because of its characteristics, how can communicate what it has been done at the farm, or in the cellar, or in the winery. So this concept, and the concept of the main social law, is if we are just working for our community, we will have better results also in the economics. So this is what we are trying to build up. And of course, this is our ideal. Probably we are quite far away from our ideal, but we are really working on that to try to create coherent communities and committed farmers towards these applications, like Michelle has mentioned about the good results of the dog trial there in Switzerland, and what the Demeter farmers could, or biodynamic farmers could achieve. So thank you, Maria Gracia.
Thank you, Eduardo, for this very interesting presentation. Also, I'd like to inform everybody that the group that Eduardo was talking about is part of the Slow Wine Coalition. Certainly, an interesting aspect that was illustrated very clearly in the question of the biodynamic method, which in fact has a fallout on society as a whole, and it impacts society as a whole. And I'd like to talk about this a little bit, because Carlo Bazzocchi, who is the president of the National Association of Technicians and Inspectors for Organic production should have been here, but he hasn't for family reasons, unfortunately. He would have given us a very interesting presentation of going beyond technical means and copper, for example, in organic and biodynamic farming. And he's one of the major experts in this, so hopefully he'll be able to send in a presentation that we can all have. But I'd like to take a couple of minutes to start thinking about starting from what Eduardo said about the social aspect. This evolutionary process between ideals and reality. Because what we have in developing the biodynamic aspect is very important. And if you always, in fact, have a very clear idea of the tenets of what you're based on and the fallout in terms of societal well-being, you will be able to overcome difficulties. And here I refer to the biodynamic cessation of vineyards. You know that one of the key aspects of organic farming is the integration of animal husbandry and cropping. This is very important. And you know that this is all important. You know that this is not easy to put into practice, and the husbandry and growing vines, for example. But if you look at the social aspect, we have, in fact, several examples. The Olzogno winery in Abruzzo in Italy is an example. It is Demeter certified, by the way. Both these are also Fidel Bio partners. They did extraordinary work because the technician of the winery arrived and he converted the farm to organic and then biodynamic farming. And he integrated the work of the local shepherds with the work of the wine growers. And this is a very, very interesting experiment, not just from an agronomic point of view, but especially from a social point of view as well, for the community and for the whole of the area. So I think that that sort of example is really important because it's something which is growing. And in Italy, i.e. we're seeing these organic districts. And also when we have districts of agricultural practices, organic agricultural practices, not just vineyards. For example, there's egg growing, and then Franciacorta is 80% bio organic, and Chianti is 50% organic. And these are organic districts, and there are many other areas which are becoming organic districts. And this is at the center of the Slow Wine Coalition, not just respecting the environment and looking after people's health and the health of the soil, but it's also concerned with, and one of the main tenets is the positive impact that these practices have on society and the local population and the community. So I think that from this point of view, the organic system is in a strategic time and period, because we know that Europe is wanting to triple the organic farming fields by 2030 in its farm to fork policy, which is part of the EU Green Deal. Certainly for Europe, 25% means tripling the organic surface area. We're very advanced in Italy because we're already 17.5% of organic farmland. But wines can give a great push here. because also for 2014, the organic wine system has become a fundamental system of the whole organic movement. We are 128,000 hectares, which represents 19% of all Italian vineyards. So 19% of Italian vineyards are organic vineyards. So since the regulation came out, we have seen a doubling of this. We know that before, in fact, we produced wine from organic grapes, but now the wine and the grapes, they're all organic. So I think that we have to really think of organic in a different way. Organic wine, people said, okay, respects the environment, but from in a wine point of view, the value of the production, it was said, wouldn't receive and achieve the excellence of other wines. Now this has been turned around, and all that pathway that was developed to look after the soil that Michele Bono talked about is a strategic practice to give identity to the particular terroir of the vineyard. And we work in terms of terroir. So again, this is an approach that together with Slow Food, we will continue to develop, because we think that the level of organic and biodynamic production is a sine qua non condition to be able to identify and have wines which are identified with a particular terroir. And at the same time, it creates values that has fallout and spin-off for all of the community in which the vineyards, in fact, live. So I think the slow wine in 26, 27 to 28 will be a great opportunity to exchange views and also to be able to taste wines from very many different producers. Now I'd like to go to put a few questions that in the meantime have come in. The first two are for, I think, for Michele Bono. I'd like to give him this. One is Paolo Carrucci from Perugia, and he asks the use of rollers in the inter-row area. Is it better than chopping up, machines that chop up? Is rolling better? And the second question, again for Michele Bono. Now, Riccardo Lucia, who says, what species are used to grow crop cover in the inter-row area? What sort of plants do you use? Thank you, Maria Grazia. Now, with the roller, we have got good experience with the roller, because when you use the roller, the plant is already alive. If you cut it, in fact, it dies right away. But if you roll it, it still remains alive. It gets crushed, but it can still mature. And the next following year, the plant will then regrow again. If you use the roller, in fact, you could create a carpet of plants. And that's a good thing, to retain humidity in the soil. So it depends on the actual year. I prefer the roller when you've got years, for example, 2021, which in Switzerland was very full of rain. The roller was a disaster, however, because you couldn't extract the excess water which was in the soil. But with these extreme climate conditions, you have to be flexible. It depends on the year. I can't say that the roller is always a good idea. It does depend on the year. You've got to be flexible. but it's an instrument which is very interesting, especially when you have a year like 2022, when you really can keep the humidity and moisture in the soil. Now, for the interrow growth species, when I use crop cover, I prefer it for the winter because I don't go over the land with a tractor. If you can, if you want to use it for the summer, well, then you've got to pass it over with a tractor when you're treating the vineyard with either copper or some organic substance. And if you use crop cover in the summer, it depends on the period. The soil will be once again pressed, and therefore I prefer the weed cover and the grass cover in the winter. I don't really know the Italian species. I only know it in German, but I can perhaps send an email to you with the choice. If the person who's asked the question would like to send me a mail, I can give you all the species in Italian. I don't have them here at the moment, but I can give them to you in Italian if you send me a mail. Yeah, I think that we can also do that through Slow Food. So this note about the Italian species, and we'll pass it on to the person that asked the question. Now, I was told that the question with regard to the comparison was Angela of Trilatinta. It wasn't from the lady that I mentioned before, the question about the roller or the cutter. There aren't any other questions at the moment, but we have still a few more minutes. So I'd like to ask the speakers if they'd like to comment on something also vis-a-vis what they have heard from the other speakers and also what's come out of the discussion. You got anything to add?
Yes, if I can ask Eduardo in particular, he talked many times about group of operators. So it will be interesting to know if they are using this group certification, if this is also allowed in for Demeter. And yes, what your experience is on that?
Normally the groups are, of course, they are normally organic groups or groups which has organic farmers coming into Demeter, and normally they are not coming with all the whole group, but part of the farmers. In this sense of the coherence and so on, what we are trying to indicate or to invite to is that first the farmers need to understand the concept. The biodynamic could be also some strange on some aspects, so they need to understand the concept. And what we want is that the farmers which are really interested on the concept, they say, yes, I am doing this already. I am already harvested with the moon, or are really applying the compost, or are really making rotations, or all my soil is covered with green manures all the time. So I'm fast, I clearly nearby this system. They are coming in. We don't want the groups to push the farmers to enter the concept. If not, problems will come for sure. So this on one, to let the farmers which are really interested to enter. But yes, basically we are taking the ICC. What we are asking the ICCs is to adapt their internal manual, for example, internal regulations, internal sanction catalog, whatever, to the Demeter standards needs. Also to train their farmers, to train their own internal inspectors, all their own advisors into Demeter standards, and we can help for this, for example, on what is the standards or related with the standards. And so basically, we have an organic internal control system. They need to go one step above to include all aspects of Demeter, and basically is that. And then, of course, we verify together with the one organic inspector could be trained as Demeter, or could be one organic inspector and then one Demeter inspector externally inspecting the farmers. Ideally, would be that the same inspector do both things, as the tour for the farm is basically the same, focusing in addition for some other aspect. But yes, we can use this structure.
Bene, grazie Edoardo anche per questa.
Okay, thank you, Eduardo, for going into the specific point. At the moment, I don't have any other questions. I'd like to remind you that the reference of the Orsonia winery has been given in the chat. Some people asked for that, and you'll find it in the chat, the details about the winery. And then there's a poll in the chat to be give us feedback on today's conference. As I don't see any other questions in the chat, there are no other comments that any of the speakers would like to make.
Maria Gracia, I can make one question to Michelle.
Certainly, certainly.
No, Michelle, if you talk a bit about the compost and I don't know, doses or type of compost, or how the compost is increasing the fertility on the soil, if based on the dog trial results.
Grazie per la domanda. Okay,
That's a good question. The compost that we used in the dog experiment, well, I don't know it. I just have experienced about the compost that can be used for biodynamic farms. We use cow dung, and in an organic farm, you can also make a biodynamic compost, and the 502 up to 506, I believe. These are products that can be put in at the end in the winter, and then they ferment, and that is a very lively compost. It's a classical complex compost that we know in biodynamics, and you can use this before the plant starts to bud again. And it gives it a good structure. It's a good structure compost, and it in fact has a sort of woodland aroma about it. And then something else that I know about the compost in vineyards or in agriculture in general, regenerative agriculture. I don't know if you know this. In Germany, regenerative agriculture is much practiced, also in Switzerland and also in vineyards, and it's called regenerative viticulture. And there we work with microorganisms directly in the compost. And we put it in a fermenter or with a vortex, which is used to make the product of Rudolf Steiner, a very dynamic 500, 501. And this vortex with the air, with the microorganisms in the compost are concentrated as a result. And you can put these directly into the soil, not above, but underneath, inside the soil. And there's a process of fermentation takes place and is aided, is facilitated. and the microorganisms will help the whole process of the soil. These are the ones I know, but I don't really know which ones we actually used for the DOC experiment. Is that okay? Does that answer your question, Eduardo? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Michele, for this further answer. Okay, well, I think that we've come to the conclusion. We're going to end the meeting at 7:30, so we can close now. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the three speakers who gave us very interesting and important details. And I think that it's obvious that biodynamic and organic practices are fundamental tools to be able to allow the soil to recover its fertility, because the soil is a living being. And the agro-organic approach, which is the part and parcel of the whole organic system, is fertilizing and giving fertility back to the soil is all important. It's all important for the future generations as well. And it's fundamental for this to also offset climate change as well. And it's fundamental in viticulture to create that identity of the wines that are growing and in the soil, and which is at the basis of the good, clean, and fair wines. So this has to also have an impact and a spin-off for the community in which the vineyards are. In fact, the vineyards are one of the richest systems because the economic benefits can have fallout for all of the community. There are Slow Wine Fair, which from the 26th, the 27th, and the 28th of February will be an opportunity to continue this exchange. And I'd like to thank Slow Food, which together with Federbio and Bologna Fiere organized this evening's meeting. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope that most of you will be at the fair so that we can meet you directly at the fair.